What's up, people? My name's Anton and welcome to September. So I've been messing about a little more with the cloth simulator recently, and today, although it's a slightly shorter video, I kind of wanted to take you through just some like troubleshooting tips and issues I kind of experienced. Not with the software itself, but just things to bear in mind when you're simulating. It can often get quite frustrating if you don't know what's causing a problem and you're sort of like working your way through it, and it gets really annoying. But I found a few fixes and just a few things for you to bear in mind. So without further ado, I'm going to hop straight into it real quick. So I've got a few examples, and this is something I was working on earlier, and it's just a really simple sort of setup. We've got this logo which is remeshed and then sort of balloons and inflates, right? You can sort of see it here. It's chucked into a subdivision surface at the minute, but it sort of inflates like this, and the reason it's contained is because there's a cylinder which is basically around the outside, right? If I just toggle this visible real quick, you'll see the actual shape of the cylinder is like this. It looks a little funky because if we take out the cloth surface, you'll see it's just a regular geometry, right? And it's all contained quite nicely. But I had an issue whereby when I was simulating before and I just put a cloth collider tag on the cylinder itself, in fact I may be able to show you again if I just take this out of the remesh. What would happen is it would play, and as soon as the geometry would touch the cylinder, it would almost glitch, or the collider just wouldn't work at all. And it's because for some reason at the moment C4D doesn't quite like geometry like planes or cylinders like this, or discs, which have no thickness to them, for lack of a better word. It will sort of reach it, and because it's almost like it doesn't technically exist, or it will just glitch with the sort of cloth simulator somehow. So what you need to do is basically add thickness to that. So that's the equivalent of if you had a plane, sort of making it a really thin cube, so it's a little more three-dimensional, and then baking that. But in this case, I just took the easy route and sort of grabbed my cylinder and put it inside a cloth surface. The only variable which I really needed from this geometry was the like radius of the cylinder itself to contain it, right? And as long as the soft body, or the cloth rather, fit inside it, it wasn't too much of an issue for me. And that for some reason fixed the issue. I just dragged the collider body back on top and it worked. So that was just something that I found today, which I thought was quite important to bear in mind. And I figured I'd share it just in case any other people were having a similar issue. And other than that, the simulation itself looked pretty cool. If you just get this rendering, you can see I was able to get some pretty nice shots with some creative sort of materials here. And it is true that you can actually get quite creative with the new cloth simulators, so take advantage of them. Another thing I wanted to talk about was super quickly just some of the little like attributes and kind of settings that you can get in the cloth simulator and kind of like what they do, right? Also how you should sort of like remesh some of your stuff. So if we just take a look in here real quick and we open up, for example, we can get some text. So I saw someone else do something pretty similar. We can just get some text and we can write, for now, September, and we can just enter that in, pick ourselves a font which we like, so we can head over to uncut sans, literally grab that, maybe make this bold, change our horizontal spacing a little bit, so we've got some text just a little closer, and we can see we got like diet September logo here. And we want something really simple, right? So we can just bake this. We just want working with some simple text geometry, just so I can show you an example of how you can get creative, right? So if we head over to draw shading lines, we can see that by default our geometry looks a little funky, and it's because we've got all these sort of subdivisions on our edges but nothing on the front, and that would cause a lot of problems with cloth simulators because it's basing it off the sort of topology of your geometry essentially, right? So it's the way it will calculate that is these, if you turn this to face mode, we can kind of see, oh, if even I head here, you'll see that these are calculated as just one face, or rather I'm trying to get C4D to highlight it here. You'll see that if you start clicking it through, it will calculate all of these as one face, and you can extrude them as that, and that's not what we want. So what would be a better alternative is we have a new function in C4D where we can remesh stuff, right? And it's just far better than what it used to be. So we can drag a text like this into the remesher and it'll start calculating, and you'll see the subdivisions change a little bit. And this is more what we want when we're dealing with cloth simulators or simulations, soft bodies or whatnot in general. So we have the mesh density control here, and we can turn that up or down. Obviously the higher we make it, the more subdivisions we're going to have. and the lower you make it, the other way around. It's a little off in some areas, but most of the time it does a pretty good job at making our geometry a little more usable. Obviously you can't just use it with text, you can use it with all sorts of stuff, but it is pretty good. And even just like that, we can grab that, hit C to bake it off, connect objects and delete, grab that, head back to our face mode. And if we wanted to make a quick little cloth simulation of this, we could right click on here, head simulation tags obviously, grab our cloth, bearing in mind that we now got our geometry topologized a little nicer, head over to project and we can get our gravity out of the way real quick and go about ballooning this, right? So we just got a cool little animation that we can look at. Set this up to 300, maybe the over the pressure to about 10 and the expansion time up. And just by playing that, you see we'll get our text sort of explode a little bit. And this is where the parameters sort of start to matter. So you'll see the reason why I needed a collider object in the first place before, because typically with balloons like this, it will literally just explode and they'll go everywhere. So here in the simulation tab, we've got a few settings which can also change your simulation, right? So it makes it a little easier if I can kind of explain these before we start simulating. But in general, the sub-steps are almost a scale of how cheesy your animation will look. So the lower your sub-steps are, the more sort of passive it'll be a little slower. So we've got our balloon settings up and we can play it and you'll sort of see like this. You'll get some weird glitches like that, but with a little bit of tweaking, you can see it sort of slows it down. It's almost like time slows down, similar to damping. But if we were to increase this, so say make this like 100, you would see pretty quickly our simulation would go crazy. So don't forget these exist because they're vital when working with cloth simulations. And another thing to bear in mind is obviously like the ballooning that we're doing right now is very different from working with duvets or sort of more like bed sheet almost type cloths, which you see a lot, or towels, things like that. So do think about that. This is almost troubleshooting just like a few of my explorations that I'd had. And say you wanted to tone this down, you can literally head over here, go to damping, tone that up, and give it a good mess about, because you can create some pretty cool creative results. I mean, even though a lot of these are quite dynamic, but if you wanted to add some motion blur, you could do that and create a pretty cool result out of it. So just to recap over one of my first points, if you wanted to create a collider for this, if you got a cube and extended it like this, just sort of making sure it fits in the shape, and you were to, for example, head over here and just get a collider on it, you'd realize you'd probably run into problems, right? As sort of like straightforward as that might seem, if you were to play this, it would glitch and go all over the place. But to fix that, we could reinitiate our cube, size it up, and quickly add our cloth surface, right? So literally grab this, chuck our cube in it, add some thickness to it, so something like 2 centimeters, and you can see it's barely visible, but it will make a difference. And obviously maintaining the same sort of like collider shape that you want, you can add simulation tags, grab your collider back, and when you play the simulation, you'll see that we may need to up the collision passes, but we are getting a collided result here. So you can up your collision passes here. Another important thing to bear in mind, and it's sort of how many passes C4D takes from that collider. So it's already looking less glitchy. If we were to up a little more, we could work with that. We're getting quite a intense sort of overpressure here. So if I was to make this maybe something like 90, we'd get more of a gradual inflation. And generally, you can experiment a little more, but avoid as many glitches as you possibly can. And with that being said, I hope you can generate some cool results. So happy experimenting, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.